Welcome to episode 21 of Ping, a Firewalls.com podcast, a bi-weekly look at cybersecurity, including interviews, news, expert tips, and the latest trends. I'm Kevin Baxter, and I'm joined by my Firewalls.com colleague, Andrew Harmon.
Hello there.
Hey, Andrew. As we tackle a different featured topic each episode. New episodes are out every other Wednesday, so subscribe or follow on your favorite podcasting platform to get the latest first. Ratings and reviews are appreciated, and you can drop us a line anytime at podcast@firewalls.com. As always, thanks for listening, and now it's time to introduce our featured topic for this episode.
So we're doing this episode a little differently. The next one, too. The bi-weekly thing from our intro doesn't really apply to this episode. Sorry, Kevin. We'll be back in a week with our next edition, which will feature a special subject and interview, but in the meantime, we've got our headlines. We're going to give them some time to shine and make them our featured topic for the episode.
And now it is time for the aforementioned headlines, making them shine in this one. In this regular segment, we discuss a few top news stories in the network security world and what they may mean to you. And we are actually going to do an extra bonus headline at the end of our typical 3. We're going to do 4 in this particular episode.
4th one, free of charge.
Free of charge, absolutely. So now let's jump into headline number 1. Pony Final ransomware targets enterprise servers, then bides its time. So Microsoft is warning everyone about ransomware attacks that are being called patient, not a word you typically associate with ransomware, as the ransomware lurks in networks for weeks or sometimes even months before deciding to strike. So this is a Java-based ransomware, which is a bit rare these days, known as Pony Final, which targets enterprise systems management servers in its initial infection. And before we go any further, Andrew, the story says Pony Final has galloped onto the scene. Any good pony puns that you'd like to share too?
Oh boy, well, I hope this is their main form of attacking people. Is that all right?
Okay. Yeah. They're not horsing around with this ransomware. They're going for it.
Right, and they certainly did not put the horse in front of the cart this time. They've gotten into the system and, as you said, have persisted for several months in some cases. Researchers believe this type of infect the system and then bide their time strategy is becoming more popular. So generally, ransomware over the last couple of years has become more targeted, more focused, and now also more patient, which is a pretty big shift from those old spray and pray methods.
Yeah, we kind of just moved on. I still had some more.
Oh, okay. Well, unload.
This ransomware is jockeying for network information.
Okay.
It deploys into the starting blocks, but it doesn't get going until a little bit later on. So, it comes down the stretch a little slower, but it gets that triple crown of information.
Wow. You've had all week to prepare for this, haven't you?
The Triple Crown not really happening this year, so got to unload my horse pun somewhere. Yeah, so it's an interesting one because you don't think of any kind of cyber attack being a particularly patient endeavor. But we have talked before about when you're, as you mentioned, the targeted nature of things. Hackers will take their time a little bit to learn about their targets to better their chances of success. And so in this case, they are taking the time to find a place to get Pony Final onto a server, and then they are paying enough attention to decide when they think the best time is to unleash it on its victim.
Right, and so Pony Final requires a Java runtime environment in order to operate, and so usually when the attackers first initially land on a system, they need to either deploy Java runtime environment themselves, if it's not already present, or do a little recon and find an endpoint that already has it as an installed, and then go ahead and piggyback off of that.
It'll exfiltrate information about the infected environments, and it will spread laterally. Encryption is carried out by changing files to a .enc file name extension. Have no idea what that stands for. And the ransom note is just a text file, actually.
Yeah, a nice, easy to read, plain text file, nothing fancy there. So, as you said, the attackers are now following a new kind of procedure. So, it starts with credential theft and a little bit of lateral movement. And then they kind of get to sit back and wait for the time and place of their choosing to deliver a ransomware payload of their choosing. So, it's a bit more flexible than the old school, just blast out thousands and hope something sticks.
Yeah, this is not an automated type of ransomware. So there is somebody pulling the strings or the reins, I guess you would say. Huh? Just thought of that one from the other end. And they're the ones who are, making this happen. Interesting thing, Microsoft says that they put out a warning earlier this year, actually. They found some of, not necessarily Pony, but other types, Pony Final ransomware, but other types of ransomware too, have been on some networks for even months, including a group of ransomware that all deployed together in April. So yeah, this is a growing issue, one that I hadn't heard about before in terms of this particular method of attack, but you can see how it would be dangerous because somebody might even find out that they had some kind of a breach. Maybe they got some sort of flag at the time, but if they don't see anything happening because of it, then, out of sight, out of mind, maybe they're like, maybe it's a false alarm or whatever. And then months later, now you find out that it wasn't a false alarm.
Right. It always behooves you to double check
Oh,
those.
nice.
Right. And so, according to our threat dictionary, if you haven't checked that out, this would fit right in with the advanced persistent threat term. So, as you said, there is a human behind this. They jump on the server and they wait until the opportune time arrives. So, advanced, check, persistent, check, and a threat.
Definitely. And so, as with any type of ransomware or malware, whatever, the article recommends, once again, avoid those weak passwords on anything public facing or internet facing. Look for any signs of credential theft or lateral movement activities. And of course, with ransomware, you want to maintain backups so that you can get right back to where you were and restore your system without having to pay up to get all that information back.
Right. You always want to keep your network stable.
On to headline number 2. Indonesia probes breach of data on more than 2 million voters. You really caught up there on the pony puns at the end. I appreciate the effort.
Do you have any Indonesia puns on tap?
No, I do have one thing that I'll bring up about this that struck me as a little confusing, but we'll get there. So right. Indonesia's election commission is investigating the release of 2.3 million voters' private information on a hacker website, along with a threat to release the data of about 200 million people. We don't know if it was the same hacker website as Home Chef or what they're looking to charge for this data, but they do actually mention what the website was. And I think it's a little different, but interesting. It's kind of similar to that type of threat that we just talked about last time.
Yes, so for those of you that are not aware, I was not before this story, Indonesia is actually the world's 4th most populous nation with 267.7 million people.
Yeah, I did not realize it was that high up on the list, but the electoral data from Indonesia was posted anonymously on the hacking forum Raid Forums, and analysts said it could be used for identity theft and fraud. Wonder what high-paid analysts they got to come up with that conclusion there.
It might be a bad thing, we think. So Indonesia's General Election Commission confirmed the authenticity of the data. So this is all quite real. Some of this is dated all the way back to 2013.
Yeah, it includes home addresses and national identification numbers. Don't know if that counts similarly to like our social security numbers here, but if that's the case, that would be pretty bad. So the one thing that I was confused about reading this story, the General Election Commission's abbreviation is KPU. Any guesses what it stands for?
Oh, Kuala Lumpur? No, that doesn't fit. I got that.
So it's Komisi Pemilihan Umum. And a quick look through Wikipedia does not explain any more about what that means. So that is the name of the agency, and that's what's on the seal of the agency, but I don't know what those words mean. Maybe they mean General Election Commission. I don't know. That's what
I did a
KPU
little
stands for.
research on some of the elections in Indonesia, and compulsory voting is not in place there. That's a law where basically all adults have to vote, and that's actually in place in quite a few countries.
Mhm.
Not the case in Indonesia. I looked this up because I was a little surprised that they claim to be well over 200 million voting records that they plan to release. And with a population of 267 million, that means over 75-80% of their population is registered to vote, which surprised me.
Yeah, what was also interesting about this was actually that the 200 million number has to include some historical people, as it mentioned that the data goes back to 2013, because as of last year, there are 192 million people registered or eligible to vote, is what they said in the story. So there's an extra 8 million in there somewhere that are part of this record dump. So that's an interesting note too. But one of the reasons why I thought this was an interesting story to include, and thanks for finding it, Andrew, was that we've talked about this here and there, but it's worth mentioning again. We've got an election coming up in about 5 months or so. And this is the danger zone with the fact that elections, we've already seen our 2016 election has had some things go on with some of the information passing back and forth. And there were some reports of hackers getting into a couple of isolated locations in the US, but this is definitely an ongoing concern when it comes to elections.
Yeah, and I mean, if you pay any attention to headlines about, for example, like DEF CON and all the different hacker and IT conventions, it seems like voting machines, it's like a game to see who can set the record for hacking them quickest.
Right.
And,
yeah.
Most every single person down to, 3-year-olds out there are apparently able to do this.
I don't think the threat of this is necessarily turning people off from registering to vote or voting or anything like that in the US, but it's an ongoing concern because there are always going to be people out there ready to jump at the legitimacy of an election question. We've heard that happen a few times already, and you want to make sure that you can guarantee, as in this case in the US, the Federal Election Commission can guarantee that we are getting correct numbers, accurate numbers, and we're not losing any data anywhere along the way.
Right. And the Election Commission in Indonesia did say that they didn't believe it was their systems that had been infiltrated, but actually more likely political parties and presidential candidates from the past who this data is also shared with. And that is true here in the United States as well. A lot of that data is shared between parties and candidates and different election commissions. So a lot of it being passed around.
Yeah, and we don't know if, with the potential for some maybe different balance of types of voting this coming year with the pandemic, the potential of more mail-in ballots or absentee ballots, or however each individual state decides to handle things. Don't know if that may lead to some more vectors for theft as well. So lots of things to consider, but it was a good time to remind people that election data is pretty important.
I do have a quote from the Capitol when this news landed. The president answered the phone and said, "Jakarta, be kidding me." You can cut that one.
Oh, that's big. On to headline number 3. Electrolux, others conned out of big money by BEC scammer. So a 64-year-old business email compromise guru has pled guilty in Houston to bilking appliance giant Electrolux and another company out of a combined $500,000 with other fraud schemes added on to the equation too. So guru, you have to do some serious business email compromising to attain that rank, I would think.
I also questioned that wording when I was originally reading it. It seems like there'd be some almost spiritual component here. So he acts in a Zen-like manner.
Yeah, there are usually a lot of things you have to pass through to get to that level in any walk of life. So BEC guru is probably something he's proud of, I would think. But
you learn at the top of that mountain.
Yeah. So the name Kennedy Juan Kim, aka Myung Kim, he did admit in a Texas federal court that he'd carried out a couple of these rather elaborate schemes, which involved spoofed emails that pretended to be internal communications from executives at the target companies. The two victims in the court documents are a Huntsville, Texas-based construction company called Solid Bridge, and the other is Electrolux, which is the parent company behind several major home appliance brands.
Right, so washing machines, dryers, refrigerators, stuff like that. And in his confession, Myung Kim, as he is also known, admits that he spoofed emails posing as executives from different companies, just asking to have money wired for various reasons, and seems as if that worked.
It did, yeah. So in the first case mentioned with Solid Bridge, he used a fake email account that had a similar name to a legitimate company email address called Chance Contracting to convince Solid Bridge to wire more than $200,000 to an account that he controlled. So he sent emails that appeared to come from Brett Chance, the owner of Chance Contracting, using an email address with a very similar domain name to the real Chance's address, and didn't raise any red flags. So the fake email said that Chance was having issues receiving check payments from Solid Bridge, and then asked Solid Bridge to mail a check to another mailing address instead, and you guessed it, it was Kim's. The money was later wired in chunks to an address in South Africa.
Yeah, and so it's actually a little crazy once you start uncovering the details of how elaborate this scheme was past the original, hey, just send me some money, please, emails. Yeah. That part was pretty straightforward, but after he got this money in an account, he then had to transfer it through, 36 credit cards over a variety of different names, 4 social security numbers, 2 birth dates, 11 mailing addresses, and an expired real estate license, all associated. A couple shell companies, an offshore account in South Africa. So this is quite a scheme he's worked up.
Befitting a guru, I guess.
Yeah.
So he used a similar tactic to convince the North American division of Electrolux to wire more than $300,000 to what it thought was a known and legitimate vendor. The money was sent to a KeyBank account, and it was set up for a different shell company that Kim created with a similar name. And again, that money also followed a similar path as the one that you just discussed. So in addition to all that, he engaged in credit card fraud, racking up another $200,000 in ill-gotten gains. He hasn't admitted to everything, but he admitted to some of the crimes mentioned here.
Yeah, and the article also mentioned an unnamed, unindicted partner. So maybe we'll see some more in the future from this story.
Yeah. So we've talked BEC, or business email compromise, quite a bit on Ping, as it's a particularly lucrative method for hackers to get some funds, and particularly damaging for companies in terms of the kind of attack, because it's directly taking money, whereas other ones may potentially lead to financial problems, but don't always necessarily do that. But business email compromise, this scheme really sounds like a lot of the ones we've talked about, where it looks like an executive is asking an employee to do something and the employee doesn't question it because it looks official. They go ahead and do it, and the money's already gone by the time they realize anything's happened.
Right. According to a Verizon data breach investigation report, which was just this year in 2020, over 67% of breaches are attributed to just a simple credentials theft through email. So a phishing scheme is proving not only effective, but more and more popular.
And the FBI reminds actually that BEC has only gotten worse during the COVID-19 outbreak, partially due to increased telework, making it harder for companies to verify transactions. As maybe some of the procedures in place have not been able to transfer to a work from home, remote work setting. So they've gotten a little looser with some of their procedures, and that makes it even easier for somebody to get in there.
Right. So Kim could face up to 20 years in prison based on what he's admitted to so far. Looks like all of these different hoops he made to jump through did not work out. So perhaps he should have asked to have iTunes gift cards instead.
All right. And now on to our special bonus edition headline. Headline number 4. The biggest hacks and data breaches of 2020 so far. So we are in June, and we were talking beforehand about the fact that it's kind of crazy to think that it's already June of 2020, but that's almost the halfway point of the year. And Story in ZDNet put together a bit of a list of the biggest hacks of the year so far in the 5+ months of 2020. We've got a list of 9, I believe, and we'll just go back and forth and read through these. And then at the end, we'll have a little bit of a reaction to all of these. Do you want to hit the first one, Andrew?
Sure. So in January, first month of the year, great place to start, Microsoft disclosed a data breach through one of the tech giant's internal customer support databases. Microsoft said that user analytics, which was anonymous, of course, contained nearly 250 million entries, but it was exposed. This includes emails and IP addresses.
That sounds kind of big. In January as well, researchers found that an Amazon Web Services database was exposed online that contained the personally identifiable information of 30,000 individuals linked to medical and recreational marijuana, including patients. It's thought that the database belonged to a POS provider for legal dispensaries across the U.S.
In February, Estee Lauder was embroiled in a data breach with 440 million records being compromised, including internal company emails and non-consumer email addresses, which is, I assume, means vendors and other parties that they work with.
Moving on to March, T-Mobile revealed a security incident in which cyber attackers were successfully able to infiltrate email services at T-Mobile, leading to the compromise of customer and employee information, as well as staff email accounts. So things that were compromised potentially were names, addresses, phone numbers, account numbers, plan information, and billing information. All could have been stolen. So definitely one of the more potentially lucrative data thefts that we've seen so far.
I was surprised by this one because as a T-Mobile customer myself, I had not heard about this.
Yeah, that can be a common theme with some of these. They manage not to tell you.
Number. Yeah. Also in March, the Marriott breach that a lot of us should be familiar with. 5.2 million hotel guests were impacted by this.
That's a big hotel.
That is a large hotel. Many floors. Hackers were able to access 2 accounts belonging to Marriott employees who had access to customer info specifically tied to their loyalty program. So this includes names, genders, phone numbers, travel information, loyalty data, and in-stay data.
Also in March, Whisper, an anonymous secret sharing app, was alerted to a security failure that exposed user content and profile information, which connected to messages including nicknames, stated ages, location data, and group memberships. That was caused by a database being left open and exposed online.
Luckily, everyone using Whisper had lied about themselves. So,
of all the places to be breached, that's probably one of the better ones.
So moving on to April, the U.S. Small Business Administration said approximately 8,000 individuals who had applied for emergency business loans during the COVID-19 outbreak had their data breached. Portal where people were applying was potentially leaking applicant names, social security numbers, physical addresses, email addresses, birth dates, citizen status, and insurance information. I'm not sure what that last one quite means, but maybe name of their insurer.
Yeah, probably some sort of piece that's included in applications for assistance with the Small Business Administration or something. But I recall that story coming out because, of course, it's just a pile-on situation for a lot of small businesses when they're just trying to do what they can to survive with the massive implications of coronavirus situation so far. So moving on to the end of April, Nintendo revealed an account hijacking scheme that compromised roughly 160,000 users. Customers claimed that hackers were using their accounts to fraudulently purchase games and Fortnite virtual currency. So it was all due to a legacy login system, which has since been disabled.
And this one's a funny story to me. It seems like they didn't even really want money. They just, a couple of hacker kids that wanted some free Fortnite skins.
Yeah, but it seems like they were fairly successful in it. Also purchasing games, so I don't know how much was spent or any of that. But this is another one that I don't recall hearing about previously.
So in May, EasyJet, a budget airline, said that information belonging to 9 million customers may have been exposed. This includes over 2,000 credit card records, worrying most of all.
Yeah, so EasyJet facing an 18 billion pound class action lawsuit due to the incident. It's a UK-based airline. So yeah, some of these are higher profile than others going through this list. The big takeaway for me was I had not heard of all of them. In fact, maybe about 50-50 for me on ones that I had heard about and ones that I was surprised about.
Yeah, I'm also surprised about how many might have affected me personally looking at this list. So. Better go check some things.
Yeah, check out those passwords and credit card statements and all of that.
Estee Lauder box.
Yeah, definitely want to check Estee Lauder out. So this was a nice summary put together by ZDNet of some of the big ones. And you can see that some are bigger than others. Some have maybe more direct financial implications right off the bat than others. But common theme is we went month by month through the year, and there was at least one pretty big one each month. Let's see, we're through 5 months of the year, and we've had 9 in this list. And this is obviously not completely comprehensive. There have been more than that, but even just some of the highlight ones taken, you're talking about 2 per month. And even if maybe you haven't been paying as close attention to cybersecurity news because of some other semi-big stories in the news this year, it's always out there. These types of situations are not going away.
Well, Kevin, in the flaming hell world of 2020, what's your prediction? Do you think second half or first half is going to have the worst breaches?
Unfortunately, there are plenty of opportunities for things to get worse in the cybersecurity area before they necessarily get better. We've talked about the fact that there's been maybe even an added focus and emboldening of online attacks since the coronavirus outbreak really took hold. That's not completely going away. You'll have people who are still remote working. Then you also have companies who are trying to ramp back up from their previous setups and don't know if those may be a little more vulnerable when they first come back together. And then, as we talked about, we've got the election coming up later in the year. There are
Black Friday.
Yeah, there are still a lot of opportunities left out there. And no, I don't think this is going away. I think this, unfortunately, may just be the appetizer. Thanks for listening to this episode of Ping, a Firewalls.com podcast. Check out the links in the description to get more info about everything that we discussed. And please do visit our blog at firewalls.com/blog. Subscribe or follow now to ensure you get the latest episodes as soon as they're available. And please do rate and review us wherever you listen to the podcast. Visit firewalls.com for all your network security needs and give us a follow on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. For Andrew Harmon, I'm Kevin Baxter. Remember, we will be back next week with another episode this time, so check your podcast feeds and our social media channels. And of course, if you're subscribed, you will have that popping in automatically. At any rate, in the meantime, we remind you to get secure,
stay secure.